California is about to hold its primary election, and the sheer volume of candidates running for office is chaotic. You're going to see dozens of names on your ballot. This diagram shows exactly how California's top 2 jungle primary works. Everyone is on the exact same ballot, and only the top 2 candidates move on to November. But here is where the math gets dangerous. If 6 Democrats carve up their base, a unified opposing party with just 2 candidates can easily sweep both spots. You might have an absolute favorite candidate who perfectly aligns with your ideology, but if they don't have the polling and funding to survive this math, a vote for them might actually help lock your party out of the general election entirely. To cut through the noise, we are looking past the dozens of long shots. We're filtering the ballot down to the viable frontrunners in the 3 most critical statewide races: Governor, Attorney General, and Secretary of State. Understanding the specific math in these 3 races is the only way to ensure your primary vote actually shapes the November election, rather than getting lost in a fragmented field. Running a statewide campaign for California governor requires tens of millions of dollars. The state has some of the most expensive media markets in the country. To see who can actually survive this primary, we need to compare the top contenders using a strict matrix: where their funding comes from, who is endorsing them, and their core platform. Tom Steyer has poured $28 million of his own money into the race, blanketing television and digital spaces with ads to build immediate name recognition. That massive early spending has helped him secure significant support from major unions and environmental groups. But heavy spending doesn't guarantee a win. Early polling has Steyer sitting around 8%. Primary voters might be experiencing fatigue with self-funded billionaire campaigns. Republican Steve Hilton is taking a different path. He has quickly consolidated conservative donors, raising over $4 million to capture the Republican base. By unifying that base while the Democrats remain fractured, Hilton is polling around 15%, making him highly viable for one of those top 2 spots. A unified conservative platform plays well in a crowded primary. The math becomes much harder in November, when he has to face a deep blue statewide electorate. Democrat Katie Porter relies on a completely different financial engine. Her campaign is built on nearly 12,000 small-dollar grassroots donors. She builds intense loyalty among her supporters, but without personal wealth or massive corporate backing, she risks being drowned out on the airwaves in the final, most expensive weeks of the race. If voters back a niche favorite without looking at their bank account and polling numbers, they risk fracturing the Democratic vote so deeply that a Republican like Hilton takes the lead, or even causes a total party lockout. The Attorney General serves as California's top cop, carrying out the governor's law enforcement directives and holding immense power over environmental regulations, tech policy, and criminal justice. This race comes down to a clear ideological split, mapped out right here as state mandates versus local control. Incumbent Democrat Rob Bonta has spent his term filing dozens of lawsuits against the Trump administration and legally forcing reluctant cities to build new affordable housing. This aggressive, top-down strategy has secured him heavy backing from the Democratic establishment and over $2.3 million in campaign contributions. State-level mandates alienate voters who believe Sacramento is overreaching, particularly those who prioritize traditional crime enforcement and local governance. Republican Michael E. Gates built his platform specifically on fighting back against those state housing mandates during his time as Huntington Beach city attorney. Gates captures the strict criminal justice vote, but his active resistance to Sacramento puts him at odds with the state's dominant legislative powers. When you vote for Attorney General, you are deciding if California's future policies will be dictated top-down from the Capitol or bottom-up by local city councils. The Secretary of State handles the mechanics of our democracy, how ballots are distributed, verified, and counted. This matrix shows how the 2 leading candidates prioritize the voting process differently, maximizing voter access versus tightening election security. Incumbent Democrat Shirley Weber's tenure is defined by permanently implementing universal mail-in voting, ensuring every active registered voter automatically receives a ballot. Universal mail-in voting drastically increases convenience. The trade-off is a much slower ballot counting process that draws fierce criticism from conservatives. Republican Don Wagner's platform focuses aggressively on election integrity, specifically calling for mandatory voter ID at the polls and faster result tabulation. While his platform energizes the Republican base, it faces intense pushback from advocates who argue strict ID laws act as voter suppression. This vote defines the mechanical rules for California's future democracy, establishing the standards for how ballots are delivered and results are verified. Understanding the platforms is only one part of the equation. You must now map these candidate profiles to your own priorities to avoid losing your influence on the ballot. Let's define the strategic Democrat. This is a voter highly concerned about a GOP lockout in the governor's race because of a fragmented Democratic field. This voter has to abandon their niche favorites. They need to consolidate their support behind the highest funded, highest polling candidates, like Steyer or Porter, to ensure at least one survives the primary math. Next is the ideological conservative, focused strictly on local control, traditional law enforcement, and election integrity. These voters have unified, aligned options in Hilton, Gates, and Wagner. But they have to accept the steep mathematical disadvantage those candidates will face against a blue majority in November. Finally, there's the pragmatic centrist. This voter weighs the practical realities of how the state government will actually function day to day. They are weighing Steyer's financial independence against Porter's grassroots ties. They are deciding if Bonta's aggressive state mandates are more effective than Gates's demand for local control. Ultimately, the June 2nd primary functions as a strategic filter, forcing a choice based on the trade-offs you're willing to accept in November.